Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on your time zone, and thanks for your time. Before I kick off, I just want to pay respect to the people of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation on whose unceded lands we conduct our business today, and respectfully acknowledge their ancestors and elders past and present. I'm going to try and share the screen, so bear with me if I have a little techno fail moment. Hey, oopsie. Can you see that? I presume we can.
Yeah, we can. Thanks, David.
Fabulous, terrific. Well, for the last 6 years or so, I've been chasing the elusive drone. Thank you, Michael. And I'm presently on the home straight of a project-based PhD documenting the rise of personal drone cultures in Melbourne in order to explore the broader societal significance. And the clips online are taken from my field research. In March of 2014, it was estimated there are upwards of 10,000 drones or UAVs in Australia. And today, whilst the actual figures are unknown, the growth in ownership's obviously increased exponentially. Melbourne, for those who live here, know that it has a reputation for fickle and inclement weather. And it was during my quest to find the perfect indoor flying location that I was introduced to the dusty and asbestos bread mill, textiles mill in Yarraville. And the first clip that's actually online is actually taken entirely from within this space, or my perfect flying location. Bradley Garrett, author of Explore Everything and geographical ethnographer whose research encompasses place hacking or space hacking, has been exploring the use of drones as an ethnographic tool to explore what he calls the nephosphere, or the space between the tops of grains and the bottoms of the clouds. To successfully traverse the nephosphere by drone requires you to look at the event space as a volume, as a set of interconnected three-dimensional spaces in which what is above and below is of equal importance as to what is proximal on a linear plane. And attaining this insight early is fundamental to the longevity of your drone, as gravity is unforgiving. So a visceral example of the nephosphere there for you. So today's personal drones are a rapidly maturing technology that can be considered mainstream. But prior to 2014, such technologies were nascent, as was the regulatory environment governing conditions of use, resulting in underground subcultures. The fledgling communities of practice exploring firsthand the potential uses of drones were an underground and loosely affiliated movement operating on the fringes of aviation and communication legislation and testing the limitations of technological innovation. I apologize for the 2-hour chorus in the background. Moral panics around drones were frequent, and the incumbent drone narratives that were propagated widely throughout mainstream media drew extensively on military usage and privacy incursion memes, and societal trust of these emerging technologies was low. As such, personal drone users tend to keep a low profile and were initially a discreet and elusive subculture and very hard to find. It was also at the Brad Mill site when I first encountered, finally, other drone users in the wild. And this first contact was with some sort of apparent cyber Buddha, as it was also my first encounter with the FPV community, who in return had their first encounter with the sensor-equipped second-generation Panet commercial off-the-shelf drone, the Parrot Bebop. The second clip on the Vimeo channel, if you hadn't had a chance to look at it, is set in a place called the Batcave. And it was actually my first night in an actual FPV meet, a clandestine affair held after dark in a shopping centre car park. FPV, as you probably know, is an acronym for first person view, which references the unique pilot perspective obtained from a camera mounted at the front of a quadcopter drone platform, in effect situating the pilot on board the drone via telepresence. This relocation is further enhanced by many FPV flyers choosing to wear wearable headset displays such as Fat Shark or Oculus, making the telepresence experience even more immersive and visceral. In 2014, the drone regulations, as they were either unknown to many or struggling to cope with the actualities of drone technology. However, by global standards, Australian drone regulations were actually quite progressive, and drones under 2 kilos in weight could be used for recreational purpose without a license, as long as simple standard operating procedures were followed. So flight during daylight hours, keeping the drone within visible line of sight, 30 meters away from people, 5 kilometers away from airports, and a maximum permitted altitude of 120 meters. However, under these standard operating procedures, the FPV mode of flight actually breaches the CASA requirements of keeping one's drone within visible line of sight to the unaided eye. So to work around this, FPVers fly indoors, which is technically outside of CASA's jurisdiction. In 2014, FPV was literally underground movement and flying at undisclosed locations referred to in online forums by code names such as Bradmill, Batcave, and The Cage, the location of my third clip, which is where I first discovered little nano drones. The Cage is a multi-level residential car park, and it's at these locations that groups of up to 30 drone racers gather with their custom-built FPV racing drones or quads, capable of incredible acrobatic maneuvers and speeds in excess of 60 kilometers an hour. FPV has been around since the inception of the personal drone age, and practitioners as a rule tend to avoid the use of the word drone because of the negative connotations, and instead use the term FPV as a verb. Participants are predominantly male, but transcend age and ethnicity, drawn together by the adrenaline rush and spectacle that's synonymous with FPV racing. Build, crash, repeat. Madeline, this is where failure actually becomes part of a rite of passage. By the end of the night, the race locations are littered with the detritus of broken drones, and many FPV drone pilots and racers build their own quads, with a DIY FPV drone costing as little as $250, often cheaper than its ready-to-fly commercial off-the-shelf consumer drone equivalent. Typically, FPV pilots are very aware, both technically and regulatory, yet ironically, those who fly often exhibit risk-taking behavior, pushing the boundaries of the technology, the regulatory envelope, and notions of public versus private space. This tendency creates an interesting tension with their desire to become mainstream, safe, and publicly recognized as a legitimate sport. Flying for mental health is also a motive for many within the freestyle FPV scene. I met Chad Novak, aka Final Glide Oz, racing FPV drones in Melbourne in June 2015. And shortly after I first met him, he went on to win the inaugural Drone Nationals held in Sacramento, California in 2015, and is something of a minor celebrity pilot in FPV circles, and is a founding member of Rotor Riot, an online FPV culture advocacy group. On a personal level, Chad uses drones to battle depression and does breathtaking acrobatic freestyle FPV as a means of affordable and effective stress relief and release from anxiety. First-person view purists refer somewhat disparagingly to the commercial off-the-shelf drone flyers practice as extreme hovering. And as much as FPV pilots and DIY drone enthusiasts don't, or at least when in front of their peers, want to be identified as users of commercial off-the-shelf ready-to-fly consumer drones, many COTS pilots also don't want to self-identify as drone pilots at all, for many of the same perception reasons that causes FPV pilots to shy away from using the word drone. This reluctance to be perceived as a drone pilot extends into the field, with pilots often not even wishing to be witnessed undertaking the practice, as much to avoid the questions the t-shirts you see here allude to, if not far more hostile interactions with the drone naive general public. As such, personal drones continue to be elusive, and drone flying can become a very solitary, unpredictable, and almost secretive activity, amplified even more so when opportunities to flight are further constrained, not only by the limits of public tolerance, but also by natural phenomena such as weather and available light. Through the project's fieldwork, it was observed that in 2014, end users of commercial off-the-shelf drones tended to either be beginners, newbies, novices, or new users to drone culture with limited technical skills in the fields of electronics or programming, and perhaps little interest in undertaking complex builds, or end users who have a specific usage application in mind, such as myself, who have discovered and are satisfied with an appropriate solution out of the box, with no further modifications required due to the highly sophisticated nature of the embedded technologies now considered as standard features in contemporary drones. Fast forward to 2020, and using DIY drones for anything other than STEM-related educational purposes, FPV or artistic and research applications is the exception. And COTS ready-to-fly drones are increasingly the norm for most personal drone users. Excuse me, and it's an example of the deep entanglement between production, consumption, and identity. COTS ready-to-fly drone production models increasingly leads to distinct consumptive typologies and unique practices. For example, why don't COTS ready-to-fly drone pilots fly with prop guards, or want to identify as being a drone hobbyist? Is it because COTS drone pilots want to be taken seriously, or are they already feeling in some way a diminishment of their role in the assemblage? Personal drone communities evolved as they transitioned from underground to mainstream, as did the hardware. The pace of innovation in consumer drones is breathtaking, and personal drones have evolved so that technologies such as sense and avoid, active track, follow me, machine vision, GPS GLONASS positioning as standard features, and the platforms are loaded with an increasing suite of smart assisted flight modes. This automation and embedded smartness lowers the entry bar or prerequisite skill requirements necessary to get drone assemblage successfully and satisfyingly aloft, to the point where there is no learning curve, and highlights the changing relationship of the pilot within the assemblage and the shifting and sometimes nebulous role the human plays, from drone operator responsible for all aspects of flight and operations to the slightly diminished role of navigator, with the machine in the assemblage taking care of autonomic flight functions, to recently the human situated as a co-performer or symbiont within the drone assemblage as the platforms become more technically advanced. This notion of co-performance is of increasing importance, especially as we move into 2020 and beyond, due to the sophisticated nature of autonomous flight systems and this rapid pace of innovation in consumer drone technologies, as alongside the shifting locus of agency within the assemblage is a necessary shifting of appropriateness, as pilots are increasingly naive. The shift in the locus of agency and control away from the human pilot and increasingly favoring the machine in the assemblage is such that I no longer fly my drone, rather I take my drone for a flight, in as much as I might take the dog for a walk. Despite this, does the design shift in the locus of agency and appropriateness herald a neo-anthropocentrism? Not the shiny promise of transhumanism, but rather a set of compensatory measures embedded within the hardware, software, and algorithms for the fact that increasingly the human's the weakest link in the assemblage, with the least situational and contextual awareness. As personal drone cultures continue to reimagine themselves, it's our changing relationship with smart technologies that's increasingly of cultural significance. And the original drone cultures themselves are shaped by the locus of agency within the assemblage. The original FPV purists were controlling nearly all aspects of flight, whereas by late 2020, Drone Racing League was announcing competitions pitting human piloted drones against fully autonomous onboard AI-controlled drones. And ironically, is there a risk that this increase in automation will take away from the very act of flying, which is what drew so many to personal drones in the first place? Thank you.